She laughed at the proposal in front of her friends. Not a nervous laugh. Not surprise. A clean, amused sound, like she'd just been handed a punchline she didn't expect but appreciated. She didn't even look at me at first. She looked at them, smiling wide, eyes bright, enjoying the moment. Then she looked back at me. "You're serious?" she asked, still smiling. I didn't answer right away. The restaurant felt oddly quiet, like sound had been turned down without warning. I was still on one knee, the ring box open in my hand, the diamond catching the overhead light in a way that suddenly felt embarrassing. Her friend to the left covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. The one on the right leaned forward, elbows on the table, interested. Not uncomfortable. Interested. I stood up slowly. That confused her. "Wait," she said, laughing again. "What are you doing?" I closed the ring box. The click was small but final. "You're right," I said calmly. "My mistake." That finally wiped the smile off her face. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and placed cash on the table. Enough to cover my share, and then some. I didn't look at her friends. I didn't look at the surrounding tables, even though I could feel people watching. I turned and walked toward the exit. She called my name, sharp and annoyed, not scared, like someone whose night had just been interrupted. I didn't turn around. Outside, the air was cool and steady. I stood there for a moment, not shaking, not angry, just alert, focused. The kind of clarity you don't get often, but recognize immediately when it arrives. I drove home without music. The apartment didn't feel like home when I unlocked the door. It felt temporary, like a place I'd already moved out of in my head. I didn't sit down. I didn't pace. I went straight to the bedroom and started packing. Only what was mine. Clothes first. Shoes. Documents. Tools. I ignored the framed photos, the furniture we'd picked together, the decorative things she cared about. None of that mattered anymore. This wasn't emotional. It was procedural. 3 hours later, my life was reduced to boxes and 2 suitcases stacked neatly by the door. The apartment looked hollowed out, like a stage after a play ended early. I sat at the kitchen counter and typed one sentence. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was factual. I sent it, watched it deliver, then blocked her number. Then her social media. Then anyone who might think they could speak on her behalf. I left before she got home. She came back to an empty apartment and a message she wasn't expecting. 7 days later, she was crying at my door. But that part didn't happen yet. What happened first was silence. The kind that settles in after you stop explaining yourself. I stayed with a friend the first night. He didn't ask questions, just cleared a room and handed me water like this was normal, which somehow made it easier to breathe. The breakdown came later, quiet and contained, when no one was watching. By morning, clarity had returned. I broke the lease, paid the penalty, sent confirmation, closed shared accounts, handled everything that tied us together with the same calm precision I'd packed with. I didn't check her messages. I didn't wonder what she was telling people. I didn't care. What mattered was distance. The first knock came on the 7th day. Hard. Desperate. Too loud for the hallway. I looked through the peephole before opening the door. She stood there barefoot, eyes swollen, hair pulled back carelessly, the confidence she'd worn so easily in public completely gone. "Please," she said the moment I opened it. "We need to talk." I studied her for a second longer than necessary. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just confirmation. That's when I knew something important. I hadn't left her that night at the restaurant. I'd left long before. I didn't invite her inside. I stepped into the hallway instead and closed the door behind me, letting it latch softly. The sound felt deliberate, controlled. The kind of sound you make when you're choosing where a boundary goes. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, trying to pull herself together. Her eyes were red, unfocused, darting over my face like she was searching for something familiar to grab onto. "I panicked," she said quickly. "You put me on the spot. My friends were there. I didn't know what to do. I waited. Silence does strange things to people who are used to filling it." She rushed to occupy it again. "I didn't mean it like that," she added. "I was joking. You know my sense of humor." "I proposed," I said calmly. "You laughed." Her mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head. "That's not fair. You're twisting it." "I'm not twisting anything." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Can we just talk inside? Please?" "No." The word landed cleanly between us. Her expression shifted, confusion first, then irritation. "You can't seriously be this cold." "I'm not cold," I said. I'm done. She stared at me, like she was trying to reconcile this version of me with the one she'd always assumed would bend eventually. So that's it, she snapped. After 3 years, you just disappear? After 3 years, I replied. You laughed. She scoffed. You're overreacting. People have bad moments. That wasn't a bad moment, I said. That was honesty. She crossed her arms, defensive now. You embarrassed me. I almost smiled. Almost. You embarrassed yourself, I said. I just stopped protecting you from it. Her jaw tightened. My friends think you're unstable. That you planned this to punish me. I nodded once. They can think whatever they want. You don't even care what people are saying about you. No. That shook her more than anything else I'd said. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead. Somewhere down the corridor, an elevator chimed. Let me fix this, she said finally, quieter. We can go to therapy. We can take time. I just need you to not shut me out. I looked at her, really looked this time. Her fear wasn't about losing me. It was about losing control of the situation. Losing the version of events where she stayed admired, forgiven, untouched by consequences. There's nothing to fix, I said. You showed me who you are. She laughed again, but this time it cracked halfway through. You're acting like I cheated on you or something. I held her gaze. You disrespected me in public. That's worse. Her eyes widened, like that thought had never occurred to her. You're being dramatic, she said weakly. No, I replied. I'm being accurate. I stepped back and reached for the door. Wait, she said sharply. If you walk away from this, you'll regret it. I paused, hand on the handle. I already walked away, I said. This is just the echo. I went inside and locked the door. I heard her knock once. Then again. Then the sound of her leaning her forehead against the wood, breathing unevenly. I stayed where I was, back against the door, eyes closed. Not because it was hard, but because it was finished. Eventually, the hallway went quiet. The next few days were uneventful in the way real endings usually are. No explosions. No dramatic apologies. Just administrative cleanup and distance settling in. I ignored messages from unknown numbers. Archived emails without opening them. Muted anyone who seemed too eager to mediate. Silence became a tool. Word filtered back to me anyway. It always does. Mutual friends checking in cautiously. Someone mentioning she was having a rough time. Another saying she didn't understand how things had escalated so quickly. From my side, nothing had escalated. I went to work. I cooked meals. I slept deeply. One afternoon, while unloading boxes from my car, I found the receipt for the ring folded inside a jacket pocket. I stared at it for a moment, then tore it in half and dropped it into a trash bin near the curb. No anger. No ceremony. Just done. That night, I received a message from someone I hadn't expected. Jenna, one of the friends at the table. I didn't open it right away. I set my phone down and finished what I was doing first. When I finally read it, the tone surprised me. I don't know if you want to hear this, but she's been telling people you had a breakdown and abandoned her. I exhaled slowly. Another message followed. I was there. That's not what happened. People noticed. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, then typed a single response. I'm not interested in correcting the story. There was a pause. I figured you'd say that, Jenna replied. But she's spiraling. I thought you should know. I didn't respond. Because I already did know. The unraveling had started the moment I stopped participating. And it wasn't over yet. The first real crack in her world didn't come from me. It came from the people she assumed would always back her. A few days after Jenna's message, I ran into Priya by accident. It was the kind of coincidence you can't plan, standing in line at a coffee shop near my office, half asleep, scrolling through emails. I heard my name before I saw her. She looked startled, like she hadn't expected to see me in real life anymore. Hey, she said quietly. Hey, I replied. There was an awkward pause. The kind where both people are deciding how much honesty the moment can handle. I just wanted to say. She hesitated, then shook her head. I'm sorry. For that night. I nodded once. You don't need to apologize. I do, she said. I should have stopped it. It got out of hand. That's between you and her, I said. Not me. Her shoulders relaxed a little, like she'd been bracing for anger and found neutrality instead. She's not doing well, Priya added, almost reflexively. She keeps asking why you won't talk to her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't fill the silence. That's probably something she needs to sit with, I said. Priya studied my face, then nodded slowly. You seem different. I am. We stood there for another moment, then ordered our drinks and went our separate ways. As I walked back to the office, I realized something subtle but important had shifted. I wasn't being defended. I was being understood. There's a difference. Over the next week, the attempts to reach me escalated, not directly, but sideways. Emails about mail she'd accidentally opened. Questions about subscriptions that had already been canceled. Logistics wrapped in excuses. Each one carried the same unspoken request. Engage with me. I didn't. When that failed, the tone changed. A long email arrived late one night. No subject line. Just paragraphs stacked tightly together, the way people write when they're afraid of being interrupted. I didn't read past the first sentence before archiving it. I slept through the night anyway. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't expected, a voicemail from an unknown number. I deleted it without listening. That was when I understood the real power of silence. Not as punishment, but as removal. When you stop responding, people are forced to face themselves instead of you. And some people can't stand that. By the end of the second week, the story she'd been telling about me had started to wobble. Not collapse, just bend. Too many people had seen the proposal. Too many remembered her laughing. Too many remembered me leaving without raising my voice. Narratives need consistency to survive. Hers didn't have it. I heard bits and pieces through the cracks. That she was angry-eyed made her look bad. That she didn't understand why I wouldn't just talk it out. That she felt blindsided by how final everything had been. Finality tends to feel sudden when you ignore warning signs. Meanwhile, my life settled into a quieter rhythm. Work filled my days. Evenings were simple. I started running again. Early mornings before the city fully woke up. The repetition helped. The silence helped more. One night, scrolling mindlessly, I came across a photo posted by someone I barely knew. A rooftop bar. Neon lights. Smiling faces. She was in the center of it. Her arm was wrapped around a guy I recognized vaguely. Someone flashy. Always performing. The kind of person who mistook attention for substance. Her smile was wide, almost exaggerated. The caption talked about good vibes and new beginnings. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. Not because I missed her. Because I recognized the pattern. She hadn't reflected. She'd replaced. I closed the app and didn't think about it again until 3 days later when my phone buzzed during a meeting. Another unknown number. I ignored it. Then another. Then a text. Please. Just 5 minutes. I don't understand why you're doing this. I put my phone face down and finished the meeting. If you're still listening at this point, stay with me. What happened next wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was the moment everything tipped past the point of repair. And if these kinds of slow, real unravelings interest you, you can subscribe quietly and come back later. No pressure, no noise. That evening, as I was leaving the office, the receptionist stopped me. There's someone asking for you, she said, uncertain. She didn't give a name. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with annoyance. Did you tell her I'm unavailable? She insisted. The receptionist replied. Said it was urgent. I sighed once. I'll handle it. She was waiting near the elevators, phone clutched in her hand, posture rigid. She'd dressed carefully, hair done, makeup flawless, like she was preparing for a meeting instead of an ambush. When she saw me, her face lit up with relief. Thank God, she said. I've been trying to reach you. This isn't appropriate, I said immediately. You can't come here. Her relief flickered into frustration. You won't answer me anywhere else. That's intentional. She stepped closer. You can't just erase me. I already did. People were watching now. Not openly, but enough. The same way they'd watched in the restaurant. Only this time, the roles were reversed. You're being cruel, she hissed. You're enjoying this. I'm not, I said evenly. I'm ending it. She searched my face for something. Anything. That suggested hesitation. When she didn't find it, her voice dropped. Please, she said. Just talk to me. I shook my head. You had your audience. You don't get an encore. I walked past her and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard her say my name again. This time softer, fractured. I kept walking. That was the moment her story stopped being about heartbreak and started being about consequences. And it was only beginning. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing again. I didn't look at it. I waited until I was home, until the door was locked behind me and the city noise was reduced to a distant hum. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and made dinner like nothing had happened. That was becoming a pattern. Later that night, Curiosity nudged at me, not about her, but about how far she'd gone to preserve her version of events. I opened one social app, one rarely used anymore, and searched her name. I wish I could say I was surprised by what I found. Post after post, carefully curated. Smiling photos, vague captions about growth and knowing your worth. Comments full of validation from people who'd only heard one side of the story. She was rebuilding her image in real time, trying to replace what she'd lost with volume. It wasn't working. The comments were thinner than they used to be. Fewer inside jokes. Less warmth. Performative support instead of genuine connection. I recognized it immediately because I'd lived inside that world for years. Attention looks a lot like affection until it doesn't. A few days later, Ben, a mutual friend who'd always stayed neutral, reached out. His message was brief. "You okay? Heard some weird stuff." I replied honestly. "I'm fine." There was a pause, then another message. "Just so you know, the story she's telling isn't sticking. People were there. They remember." I thanked him and left it at that. I didn't need allies. I didn't need vindication. But knowing the truth didn't require my defense felt like a quiet win. Her unraveling accelerated after that. Not dramatically. Subtly. Friends stopped returning calls. Invitations dried up. The guy from the rooftop photo disappeared from her feed as suddenly as he'd arrived. I heard later, through someone who'd heard it from someone else, that he'd borrowed money from her and vanished. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard that. I felt confirmation. Some people mistake chaos for excitement and call it chemistry. They don't realize the pattern until it burns them too. She tried a different tactic after that. An email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. Short, controlled, almost professional. "I need to collect the rest of your things. I can't keep storing them." I stared at the screen for a long moment. She was testing the line again, looking for an opening, any reason to pull me back into conversation. I replied with one sentence. "Everything that mattered has already been removed." Then I blocked the address. The response came faster than I expected, from yet another number. "You don't get to just disappear like this." I didn't answer. A week later, there was another knock at my door. Not loud this time. Careful. Hesitant. I didn't open it. Through the peephole, I saw her standing there again, this time without makeup, shoulders slumped, phone hanging loosely in her hand. She knocked once more softly. "Please," she said, voice barely carrying through the door. "I just need to understand." I leaned my forehead against the wall and closed my eyes. Understanding wasn't what she wanted. Control was. I stayed where I was until she left. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, something unexpected happened. I got a call from her sister. We'd never been close, but she'd always been polite. Reasonable. The kind of person who noticed things but didn't interfere. "Hi," she said carefully when I answered. "I won't take much of your time." I waited. "She's not okay," her sister continued. "She's angry at everyone. Blaming you. Blaming our parents. Blaming her friends. I don't think she knows how to sit with what happened." "That's not something I can help with," I said gently. "I know," she replied quickly. "I just wanted you to hear it from someone who isn't trying to manipulate you." I appreciated that more than I expected. "I hope she figures it out," I said. "So do I," her sister replied. "Take care of yourself." When the call ended, I realized how far things had shifted. Her own family wasn't asking me to fix it. They were asking me to stay out of it. That was new. That was final. The weeks that followed were quieter. Not empty, just unburdened. I threw myself into work, took on a project that demanded long hours and sharp focus. It felt good to be needed for competence instead of convenience. I started seeing friends again. Not the social circle we'd built together, but people from before her. People who didn't require explanation or performance. We talked about ordinary things. We laughed without it feeling staged. One night, over drinks, someone asked casually, "You ever hear from her anymore?" I shook my head. "No." "Good," he said simply. I agreed. I thought about the man I'd been when I knelt on that restaurant floor. Hopeful. Certain. Willing to offer everything to someone who'd never planned to receive it with care. I didn't feel embarrassed for him anymore. I felt protective. Because that man had done the hardest thing possible when it mattered. He'd stood up and walked away. And every day after that, the distance between who I was and who I'd become grew just enough to breathe. The story wasn't over yet, but the ending was already locked in. The silence didn't calm her. It provoked her. At first, she tried to act like nothing was wrong. I saw it in fragments. Mutual friends posting group photos where she was suddenly front and center, smiling too wide, captions full of forced optimism. New chapter. Protecting my peace. The kind of phrases people use when they're trying to convince themselves. But silence has a way of stripping away performance. Within 2 weeks, the cracks started showing. Someone forwarded me a message she'd sent to a group chat I'd long since muted. It was late at night, rambling, defensive. She kept repeating the same line in different ways. I don't understand why he's doing this. As if my leaving had happened randomly, without cause. She wasn't asking what she'd done wrong. She was asking why the consequences were real. The first public slip came at a party I didn't attend. Too much alcohol, not enough restraint. Someone joked about engagement drama, and instead of laughing it off, she snapped, raised her voice, rewrote the story aggressively, accusing me of planning the proposal to pressure her, of embarrassing her. The room went quiet. People don't like being recruited into someone else's meltdown. After that, invitations slowed, then stopped. The guy she'd been parading around, the loud one with the expensive shoes and empty confidence, disappeared almost overnight. One day he was tagged in her photos, arm wrapped around her waist. The next day he was gone. No explanation. No goodbye post. Just erased. I didn't need to hear the details to understand what had happened. She had chased the opposite of stability and found exactly what it offered. She tried again with me after that. Different approach this time. Controlled. Calculated. An email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. Short sentences. Neutral tone. I think we both said things we didn't mean. I'd like to clear the air. Not to get back together. Just to end this properly. I almost laughed. People who benefit from chaos always want closure once chaos stops working in their favor. I didn't reply. That's when she crossed the line. She showed up at my workplace. Not inside this time. Outside, near the entrance, waiting where she knew I'd have to pass. She stood there pretending to scroll on her phone, but her posture gave her away. Rigid. Expectant. I saw her before she saw me. I considered turning around, taking another exit, but I didn't want avoidance to become a habit. I walked past her. Mark, she said sharply. I stopped, turned, and met her eyes. What do you want? I asked calmly. She looked startled by how flat my voice was. We need to talk. No, I said. You need to leave. Her eyes flashed. You don't get to decide that. I do, I replied. About my life. People were walking by now. Glances. Curiosity. The same kind of attention she'd thrived on before. This is cruel, she said, lowering her voice. You're enjoying punishing me. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm opting out. She scoffed. So you just disappear and let everyone think I'm the villain? I didn't tell anyone anything, I said. You handled that part yourself. That landed. Her mouth opened, then closed. She searched my face for hesitation. There was none. You're acting like you're better than me, she said bitterly. No, I said. I'm acting like I'm done. For a second, something raw broke through her anger. Fear. Real fear. You'll regret this, she said quietly. You'll end up alone. I nodded once. Maybe. But it won't be with someone who laughs at me in public. That was the moment she lost control. Her voice rose. You embarrassed me. I leaned in slightly, not threatening, just enough to make the point clear. I proposed, I said evenly. You humiliated me. Everything after that was your choice. People were staring now. She noticed and stopped herself, clamping her mouth shut. The performance instinct kicked back in too late. I didn't wait for another word. I turned and walked away. Behind me, she called my name again, this time with something close to desperation in it. I didn't slow down. That night, I slept without interruption for the first time in months. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from unknown numbers and a message from her sister asking if I was okay. That was when I knew the collapse had reached the point of no return. Because when someone's own family starts checking on you, the story has already flipped. And the final confrontation, whether she knew it or not, was coming. The shift happened quietly at first. It wasn't some dramatic collapse or public apology. It was smaller than that, subtle changes that only stood out if you knew how things used to be. Her name stopped coming up in conversations the way it once had. When it did, it was followed by awkward pauses, people choosing their words carefully. That's how you know a story has turned. I heard about the job situation from someone who worked in the same building she did. Not a friend, not a confidant, just a passing connection who mentioned it casually, the way people mention weather. She's not doing great at work, he said. A lot of tension. Missed deadlines. HR meetings. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need details. Pressure reveals things people can hide when everything's going their way. Apparently, the confidence she'd worn so easily before had started to crack under scrutiny. Snapping at coworkers. Deflecting blame. Rewriting conversations the same way she'd tried to rewrite ours. Only this time, there were emails. Witnesses. Paper trails. Performance doesn't hold up in environments that require consistency. A week later, I heard she'd taken personal leave. Another week after that, it became time off to reassess. By the third week, her desk was cleared. I didn't feel satisfaction when I found out. I felt distance. Like hearing news about someone you used to know well, but no longer recognize as part of your life. She tried again after that. This time, it wasn't anger or entitlement. It was panic. The message came through a mutual contact, someone who clearly didn't want to be involved but felt obligated to pass it along. She's asking if you'd talk to her. Just once. She says everything's falling apart. I typed a response, deleted it, then typed another. No, that was it. Because at some point, continuing to engage becomes cruelty to yourself. Her desperation escalated after that. Not loudly, but persistently. New numbers. Emails from burner accounts. Messages framed as emergencies. Each one trying to manufacture urgency. I ignored all of them. And something interesting happened when I did. People stopped trying to reach me on her behalf. When you refuse to play a role long enough, others stop casting you in it. She started losing more than just access to me. Her friend group fractured. The same people who'd laughed that night began distancing themselves, quietly at first, then openly. No one likes being associated with someone whose drama keeps spilling into shared spaces. The stories about her shifted tone. From she's heartbroken, to she's having a hard time, to she's kind of a mess lately. That's the arc. The man she'd replaced me with, the flashy one, the loud one, was gone completely now. Not just absent, but erased. Mutual friends hinted at money borrowed and favors unpaid. The kind of exit that leaves no one defending you. She had traded stability for excitement and ended up with neither. The final attempt came late one night. I was at home, cooking, phone on the counter. It buzzed once, then again. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then the door buzzer rang. I froze. I checked the camera. It was her. She looked different. Smaller. Not dressed for effect this time. No performance. Just exhaustion and raw nerves. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes were red, not from crying recently, but from crying often. I didn't open the door. She pressed the buzzer again. Longer this time. Please, she said through the intercom, voice breaking. I don't know who else to talk to. I stayed silent. I lost my job, she continued, words spilling out. Everyone thinks I'm the problem. I don't understand how this happened so fast. That part almost made me laugh. Not out of cruelty, but disbelief. How did this happen? She leaned closer to the camera. I just need you to tell me what I did wrong. There it was. Not remorse. Not accountability. Confusion. She wasn't asking how to fix it. She was asking how it got away from her. I pressed the button. You laughed at me, I said calmly. In public. Silence. That was the moment, I continued. Everything after that was just momentum. She shook her head, tears forming. That can't be it. People don't lose everything over one moment. They do, I said. When that moment reveals who they really are. She slid down against the wall outside, sitting on the floor now, crying openly. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she whispered. I closed my eyes. That's not my responsibility, I said. Goodbye. I released the button. I watched the camera feed as she stayed there for several minutes, then slowly stood up and walked away. She didn't come back. That was the last time I heard her voice. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. The chaos stopped. No more messages. No more intermediaries. No more attempts. It was like she'd finally hit the bottom and realized there was no one left to argue with. For the first time since the restaurant, the story felt settled. Not finished, but inevitable. And that's when my life fully began moving forward without her shadow anywhere near it. The next chapter wasn't about her anymore. It was about what happens when you choose yourself and don't look back. After that night, the silence changed texture. Before, it had felt tense, like something holding its breath. Now it felt settled. Final. The kind of quiet that doesn't expect to be interrupted. I didn't hear from her again. Not directly. Not indirectly. No new numbers. No borrowed voices. No late-night emails pretending to be urgent. Whatever fight she'd been having with reality had finally run out of energy. People stopped mentioning her, too. At first, that felt strange. Then it felt like relief. Life has a way of correcting its course when you stop interfering with it. My days filled themselves without effort. Work demanded focus in ways that were rewarding instead of draining. I started waking up earlier, not out of anxiety, but because I wanted the time. I went to the gym consistently, not to punish myself or transform into someone else, but because routine felt grounding. There's something stabilizing about effort that produces predictable results. Lift the weight. Put it down. Repeat. I hadn't realized how much of my old life had been spent compensating, anticipating moods, smoothing over friction, preparing explanations that were never actually requested. Without that constant mental load, everything else felt lighter. One evening, while sorting through a drawer I hadn't opened since moving in, I found an old notebook. Inside were plans I'd once made quietly, ideas for trips, long-term goals, notes about things I wanted to learn or build. They weren't about us. They were about me. I sat on the floor for a while, flipping through the pages, and felt something unexpected. Regret, not for losing her, but for how long I'd postponed myself. That realization didn't hurt. It motivated. Around that time, I started spending more time with someone new. Slowly, carefully. No labels. No declarations. Just conversation that didn't feel like negotiation. Silence that didn't need to be filled. She noticed things. Small things. The way I paused before answering certain questions. The way I didn't rush intimacy. The way I listened without performing. "You're very intentional," she said once. Not as praise, but observation. "I had to learn how to be," I replied. She didn't ask why. That mattered. Months passed. One afternoon, I ran into her sister again, this time by accident, outside a bookstore downtown. She hesitated when she saw me, then walked over. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." We stood there for a moment, both aware of the shared history hovering unspoken between us. "She moved," her sister said eventually. "Different city. New start." I nodded. "That's probably good." "She's different now," she added. "Quieter." I didn't ask follow-up questions. I didn't need updates. "I wanted you to know," she said. "She doesn't blame you anymore." That almost made me smile. "I never needed her to," I said. Her sister studied my face, then nodded slowly. "I can see that." We said goodbye and went our separate ways. Walking home, I realized something important. I hadn't won. There was no victory lap. No satisfaction in watching someone else fall apart. If anything, the most meaningful part of all this was how little I thought about it now. That's how you know you've moved on. When the thing that once consumed your emotional bandwidth becomes background noise, then silence, then nothing at all. One night, sitting alone on my balcony, city lights flickering below, I thought back to that moment in the restaurant. The laughter, the eyes on me, the instinct to shrink that I'd overridden without even realizing it. Standing up had been instinctual. Staying gone had been intentional. There's a difference. Anyone can walk away once. Very few people can maintain the distance afterward. That's where the real strength is. I didn't rebuild my life out of spite. I rebuilt it because it was mine to rebuild. Because respect, real respect, starts internally and echoes outward. I no longer felt the need to explain myself to anyone who hadn't lived inside the decisions I'd made. The people who mattered understood. The rest faded naturally. That's the quiet truth no one talks about. You don't lose people when you choose yourself. You lose roles you were never meant to play. And when those roles disappear, what's left is space. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to become someone you actually recognize. The story wasn't ending with a dramatic confrontation or a final word. It was ending with something far rarer. Peace. And there was still one more thing worth saying. One last realization that only comes when enough time has passed. That would come next. Time did what it always does when you stop fighting it. It made everything smaller. Not insignificant, just contained. The memory of that night at the restaurant no longer carried heat. It existed the way old photographs do. Proof of a moment, not a wound you revisit. I could recall it clearly without feeling pulled back into it. That's when I knew the story had truly ended. Not because she disappeared completely, but because her presence, or absence, no longer affected my decisions. I didn't wonder where she was or what she was doing. I didn't imagine alternative versions of the past where things turned out differently. Those mental loops had shut down. I'd moved apartments again by then. Not out of necessity, out of preference. A place with more light. Fewer reminders. I kept it simple. One comfortable chair by the window. Books I actually read. A kitchen that stayed clean because no one else was creating messes I felt obligated to manage. It felt like ownership in the truest sense. One evening, while unpacking the last box, I found something I'd forgotten about entirely. A small envelope tucked between old documents. Inside was a note she'd written me years ago, early in the relationship, when everything felt intense and promising. I read it once. It talked about how safe she felt with me, how stable, how grounded, how she admired my consistency. I folded it back up and threw it away. Not out of anger, out of accuracy, because I finally understood what had happened. She hadn't rejected me because I wasn't enough. She rejected me because I was. Stability feels boring to people who confuse chaos with excitement. Respect feels limiting to people who crave applause. And commitment feels threatening to those who measure their worth by attention instead of integrity. That realization didn't make me bitter. It made me free. I stopped seeing myself as someone who'd been left behind and started seeing myself as someone who'd stepped out of a situation that was never going to honor him. That shift changed how I moved through the world. I chose differently after that. I paid attention to how people handled discomfort, how they treated moments when they weren't the center of attention, how they spoke about others when no one was watching. I didn't rush intimacy. I didn't negotiate boundaries. And for the first time in a long time, I trusted my instincts without questioning whether they were too much. They weren't. They'd been right all along. I heard one last update about her months later, through a chain of people so distant it barely counted as information. She'd changed cities again. New job. New circle. Same pattern. I didn't feel pity. I felt acceptance. Some people don't change because they don't see a problem. They just keep resetting the stage and hoping the audience responds differently. I wished her well in the abstract way you wish a stranger no harm, then let the thought pass. My life didn't need her absence to define it anymore. One night, sitting quietly with someone who actually listened when I spoke, I was asked a question that would have once sent me spiraling. "Do you regret it?" she asked. The way it ended, I thought about it carefully. "No," I said. "I regret how long I ignored what I already knew." That answer surprised even me, because it was true. The strongest moment in this entire story wasn't walking out of the restaurant. It wasn't packing my things. It wasn't refusing to engage when she came back desperate. It was the moment I stopped asking myself whether I was allowed to leave. I didn't need permission. I didn't need agreement. I didn't need closure. I needed self-respect. And once I chose that, everything else followed naturally. People talk about endings like there's something dramatic, final conversations, apologies, grand realizations. But most real endings are quiet. They happen when you stop participating, when you don't return the call, when you don't explain yourself, when you don't try to be understood by someone who never tried to understand you. That's when a chapter actually closes. So if you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of a moment you don't fully understand yet, if something in your life feels off, humiliating, or quietly diminishing, know this. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to choose dignity over familiarity. You're allowed to walk away without turning it into a war. And you're allowed to rebuild without proving anything to anyone. That's not weakness. That's clarity. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing. Not for drama, not for spectacle, but for grounded, real stories about knowing your worth and acting on it when it matters. Thanks for staying until the end.